My name's Emily, and I'm 32. Picture me at my sister Clara's wedding in a dusty rose dress that's pinching my sides. Napa Valley's glowing with fairy lights, laughter, and clinking glasses. My 7-year-old Lucas is beside me, his tie already a mess. I'm smiling, trying to soak in Clara's joy when Lucas tugs my hand. His face is pale, eyes wide. "Mom, we need to leave now," he whispers. I laugh, thinking he's just tired, but then he pulls out his cracked phone and shows me something that freezes my heart. A blurry photo of Clara's new husband with another woman. Have you ever had a kid drop a truth that changed everything? Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if this hits home, please like and subscribe for the rest of the story. I pulled Lucas to a quiet corner by the dessert table where the scent of chocolate truffles mixed with the faint tang of wine. The band was playing a slow jazz tune and couples swayed nearby, but my world had narrowed to my son's trembling hands clutching that old phone. I knelt down, my dress catching on the wooden floor, and looked into his wide brown eyes. "Lucas, honey, what's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice soft, though my pulse was racing. He swallowed hard, his small fingers fumbling to zoom in on the blurry photo. "I took it last week at the park," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Near our house. That's Aunt Clara's husband, with some lady." My stomach twisted. The man in the photo was unmistakably Nathan, his dark hair slicked back, leaning close to a woman with a red scarf. They were sitting on a bench, too close, his hand on her arm. "Lucas, you sure this is him?" I asked, hoping he'd hesitate, maybe admit it was a mistake. He nodded, his lip quivering. "I saw them, Mom." He looked nervous, like he was hiding something. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair, but my mind was spinning. Nathan had been nothing but charming since he swept into Clara's life a year ago. He'd bring her flowers, crack jokes at family dinners, even helped Lucas build a birdhouse once. Could Lucas have misunderstood kids see things and make up stories right? But the details, the red scarf, the park near our house, felt too sharp, too real for a 7-year-old to invent. I stood, smoothing my dress, and scanned the reception. Nathan was laughing with Clara near the bar, his arm around her waist. She looked so happy, her white dress glowing under the string lights. I wanted to march over and demand answers, but my feet stayed glued to the floor. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined Clara's day over nothing? Lucas tugged my sleeve. "Are you mad at me?" he asked, his voice small. "Oh, sweetie, no," I said, pulling him into a hug. "You did the right thing telling me. I'm just figuring out what to do." His small body relaxed against me, but I could feel his heart beating fast. I glanced at the photo again, zooming in on the woman's face, but it was too blurry to make out. My brother Ethan sauntered over, a glass of bourbon in hand, his tie loosened. "What's with the secret meeting?" he teased, grinning. "You two plotting to steal the cake?" I forced a laugh, slipping Lucas's phone into my clutch. "Just kid stuff," I said, but my voice sounded tight. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're too serious, Em. Lighten up. It's a wedding." He ruffled Lucas's hair and wandered off, joining a group of cousins laughing loudly. I watched him go, irritation flaring. Ethan always had a knack for brushing things off, but his words stuck. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. But then I remembered something Ethan said months ago when Clara first introduced Nathan. "Guy's got a bit of a wild past," he'd muttered over beers at a barbecue, but when I pressed, he shrugged it off, saying it was just gossip. I'd let it go, then caught up in Clara's excitement. But now, it felt like a warning I'd ignored. Lucas was watching me, his eyes searching my face. I squeezed his hand. "Let's keep this between us for now." "Okay," I said. "I need to figure out what's going on." He nodded, but I could see the worry in his expression, like he was carrying a weight too big for his small shoulders. I led him back to our table, my mind racing. The reception was in full swing, the air thick with perfume and chatter. But I felt like I was underwater, every sound muffled. I kept stealing glances at Nathan, watching for any sign he wasn't the perfect groom everyone thought he was. His smile seemed too polished now, his laughter a little too loud. I picked up my glass of wine, the cool stem grounding me, and told myself to stay calm. I'd watch him tonight, see if anything else felt off. If Lucas was right, I couldn't let Clara walk into a marriage built on lies. But if he was wrong, I risked breaking her heart for nothing. Either way, I had to know. I settled Lucas at our table with a plate of mini cupcakes, his favorite, and told him to stay put while I grabbed some water. My throat felt dry like I'd swallowed sand. The reception was a blur of color and noise, the band now playing an upbeat swing that had guests crowding the dance floor. I weaved through the crowd, my clutch heavy with Lucas's phone, and made my way to the bar. The bartender was busy, so I leaned against the counter, scanning the room. Nathan was still near Clara, but something was off. He kept glancing at his phone, his thumb swiping quickly, then slipping it into his pocket when Clara turned to him. My stomach churned. Was he texting someone right now at his own wedding? I gripped the bar's edge, my knuckles whitening. I needed to stay calm to think this through, but my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the music. As I waited for my water, I noticed Nathan excuse himself from Clara's side, murmuring something in her ear before heading toward the patio doors. He moved fast, his shoulders tense like someone trying not to be seen. Without thinking, I followed, keeping my distance. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside the vineyard, stretching dark and quiet beyond the glow of the reception. Nathan was a few yards away, his back to me, phone pressed to his ear. I ducked behind a trellis covered in ivy, my heels sinking into the soft earth. His voice was low, but I caught fragments. "It's handled," he said. "Don't worry, just stay put." My breath caught. Who was he talking to? I strained to hear more, but he hung up and turned, forcing me to shrink deeper into the shadows. He didn't see me, but his face looked different out here. No trace of the charming groom, just a man with sharp eyes and a clenched jaw. I waited until he slipped back inside before stepping out, my hands shaking. Was this the nervous man Lucas saw in the park? As I brushed dirt from my dress, someone bumped into me, nearly knocking me over. "Sorry," a woman muttered, balancing a tray of empty glasses. She was one of the caterers, her apron smudged with chocolate. Her name tag read Sophie. "You okay?" she asked, glancing at my face. I must have looked rattled because she hesitated, lowering her tray. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, but my voice was unsteady. She tilted her head like she wasn't convinced, then leaned in. "Saw that guy out here earlier?" she said quietly, nodding toward the doors Nathan had used. "He was arguing with someone in the parking lot. Looked heated." My heart skipped. "Who?" I asked, too eager. She shrugged. "Some woman with a red scarf." Didn't catch her face. The words hit like a punch. Red scarf. The same detail Lucas mentioned. I thanked her, my mind racing, and headed back inside. The reception felt suffocating, now the laughter too loud, the lights too bright. I found Lucas still at the table, picking at his cupcakes. He looked up, his eyes searching mine. "Did you find something, Mom?" he asked, his voice so small it broke me. I sat beside him, my hand on his shoulder. "Not yet, buddy," I said, "but I need you to tell me everything you remember about that day in the park." He nodded, scooting closer. "She had sunglasses," he said, and a loud laugh. "They didn't see me because I was behind the slide." I took the picture because I thought Aunt Clara should know. I hugged him tight, my chest aching. "You're so brave," I whispered. But inside, I was unraveling. Lucas shouldn't have to carry this. I shouldn't have to doubt my sister's husband. But Sophie's words, Nathan's call, the photo, they were all piling up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I glanced at Clara across the room, twirling with our cousin on the dance floor, her smile wide and unguarded. She had no idea. I tucked Lucas's phone deeper into my clutch, its weight like a stone. I had to talk to her, but how? The night was slipping away, and with every minute, the truth felt closer to slipping out of my grasp, too. I left Lucas with a cousin at the table, promising I'd be back soon, and slipped through the crowd toward the bridal suite. My heart was hammering, each step heavier than the last, like I was walking toward a cliff. The reception's noise faded as I reached the quiet hallway, the soft glow of chandeliers casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. Clara was inside, I knew, touching up her makeup or adjusting her veil, probably humming to herself, blissfully unaware. I clutched my purse, Lucas's phone inside like a ticking bomb. I had to tell her, but the thought of shattering her joy made my chest ache. I knocked softly, and Clara's voice called out, "Come in." She was standing by a full-length mirror, her white dress catching the light, a vision of everything I wanted for her. "Hey, you!" she said, turning with a grin. Escaping the chaos. Her smile faltered when she saw my face. What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling, and pulled out Lucas's phone. "Clara, I need you to look at something," I said, my voice low but steady. I opened the photo, the blurry image of Nathan and the woman with the red scarf filling the screen. "Lucas took this last week," I said, "at the park near my house. It's Nathan, with someone else." Clara's eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me, her brow furrowing. She laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that cut through the room. "That's ridiculous," she said, shaking her head. "Nathan's been with me all week. Lucas must have gotten it wrong." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "He's sure, Clara?" He said Nathan looked nervous, like he was hiding something. The woman had a red scarf. Clara's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation. She set down her lip gloss with a clink. "So what?" she said, crossing her arms. "You're saying my husband's sneaking around because of a blurry picture, Em? Come on. I know you're protective, but this is my wedding day." My heart sank, a familiar sting rising. She wasn't listening, not really. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. "I saw Nathan outside just now," I said. "On the phone saying it's handled, don't worry. And a caterer saw him arguing with a woman in a red scarf earlier." Clara's eyes narrowed, her cheeks flushing. "You're spying on him now," she snapped. "What's next? You gonna tail him to the honeymoon?" Her words hit like a slap, but it was her next ones that stung deeper. "Is this because your marriage fell apart? Are you jealous?" "I'm happy." I froze. The air sucked out of me. My divorce 3 years ago was a wound I thought we'd moved past. I'd cried on her couch, rebuilt my life for Lucas, and she was throwing it in my face. "Clara, that's not fair," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm trying to protect you." She turned back to the mirror, adjusting her veil with sharp, jerky movements. "Protect me by ruining my day," she said. "Nathan told me about his ex, Rachel. She's been texting him, sure, but he's done with her. I trust him. Unlike you, I don't assume the worst." I wanted to scream, to shake her, but the door creaked open before I could respond. Our mother Diane stepped in her silver dress, shimmering her smile tight. "Everything okay, girls?" she asked, her eyes darting between us. Clara forced a laugh. "Emily's just being dramatic," she said. "Tell her to relax, Mom." Diane's gaze settled on me, heavy with that old, familiar judgment. "Emily, let's not make a scene," she said softly. "It's Clara's day. Let it go." I stared at them, my mother and sister, their words piling on like stones. I'd spent my life swallowing my doubts to keep the peace. But this wasn't about me. It was about Clara, about the truth. I slipped the phone back into my purse, my fingers cold. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll drop it." But as I turned to leave, my heart was screaming that I couldn't let this go, not when I knew something was wrong. I stumbled back into the reception, the hallway's silence replaced by a wall of music and chatter. My legs felt unsteady, like the ground had shifted beneath me. Clara's words echoed in my head, sharp and accusing, while Diane's quiet reprimand burned like a fresh cut. I scanned the room for Lucas, needing his small hand in mine to anchor me, but he was still with our cousin, giggling over a game of tic-tac-toe on a napkin. I couldn't go to him yet, not with my face hot and my thoughts spiraling. Instead, I drifted toward the bar, the same spot where I'd seen Nathan's nervous glances earlier. The bartender slid a glass of water my way, but I barely noticed my eyes locked on the dance floor, where Clara had rejoined the party, laughing with friends like nothing had happened. How could she brush me off so easily? I gripped the glass, the cold biting my palm, and tried to breathe through the anger coiling in my chest. That's when I overheard Nathan's best man, Greg, at a nearby table, his voice slurred from too many whiskeys. He was leaning toward a groomsman, chuckling. "Nathan's still got those old habits, huh?" he said, elbowing his friend. "Always a ladies' man." My blood ran cold. I turned, stepping closer, my pulse loud in my ears. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Greg's grin faded, his eyes darting away. "Just a joke," he mumbled, scratching his neck. "You know how guys talk?" "No, I don't," I said, stepping into his space. "Tell me." He shifted in his chair, clearly regretting his words. "Look, Emily, it's nothing," he said. "Nathan's a good guy now. Just had some fun back in the day." I stared at him, my heart sinking. Fun. The word felt like a lie, heavy with secrets I wasn't supposed to know. Before I could press further, Greg stood muttering about needing another drink and brushed past me. As he did, something fell from his pocket, a small plastic hotel key card landing near my foot. I bent down, picking it up, my fingers trembling. It was for a room in the Vineyard's guest lodge. Why did Greg have this? Was it Nathan's? My mind flashed to Sophie's story about the woman in the red scarf, to Nathan's hushed phone call. I slipped the card into my purse, its edges sharp against my fingers, and felt a wave of nausea. I was digging deeper into something I wasn't sure I could handle. Lucas's voice broke through my haze. "Mom," he called, running over, his cheeks flushed from playing. "Are you okay? You look sad." I forced a smile, kneeling to meet his gaze. "I'm fine, buddy," I said, but my voice cracked. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, his eyes searching mine, and my heart twisted. He was too young to feel this guilt, too young to be caught in this mess. "No, sweetie, you didn't," I said, pulling him close. "You're perfect." But as I held him, I felt eyes on me. Across the room, Diane was watching, her lips pursed, like I was the one causing trouble. I stood, guiding Lucas back to the table, my resolve hardening. I needed answers, not just for Clara, but for myself. I scanned the crowd and spotted Sophie, the caterer, clearing plates nearby. I waved her over, keeping my voice low. "You said you saw that woman in the red scarf?" I said. "Was she here tonight?" Sophie glanced around, then nodded. "Saw her in the lobby earlier," she whispered. "Looked like she was waiting for someone." My stomach dropped. Waiting for Nathan? I couldn't shake the image of him slipping away, his phone call, his lies piling up. I thanked Sophie and turned back to the party, but it felt like a stage, everyone playing their parts while the truth festered underneath. Clara was dancing with Nathan now, her head on his shoulder, and I wanted to scream. How could I stand here knowing what I knew and do nothing? But Clara's rejection, Diane's disapproval, Greg's evasiveness, they all pressed down on me, making me feel small alone, like I was the one betraying her by doubting him. I clutched the key card in my purse, its presence a quiet scream, and knew I was running out of time to decide what to do. I couldn't stand still anymore. The key card in my purse felt like it was burning a hole through the silk, urging me to move. The reception's music pulsed a lively pop song now, but it grated against my nerves. Lucas was safe with our cousin, coloring on a napkin, so I slipped away, my heels clicking down the vineyard's guest lodge hallway. The air was cooler here, the party's noise a distant hum, but my heart pounded so loud it drowned everything else. The keycard had a room number 214 etched in small black print. I had no plan, just a need to know if this was Nathan's secret, if the woman with the red scarf was waiting behind that door. I climbed the stairs, my dress catching on the railing, and found the room at the end of a dim corridor. The brass number gleamed under a flickering sconce. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door, my breath shallow. What if I was wrong? What if this was nothing, and I was about to blow up Clara's life for no reason? But Lucas's voice, his certainty, Sophie's whisper about the woman they pushed me forward. I knocked, sharp and quick, then stepped back, clutching my purse like a shield. The door opened, and there she was, a woman in a sleek black dress, a red scarf draped over her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her eyes widened when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cool, almost amused. I swallowed, my mouth dry. "I'm Emily," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Clara's sister." "I think you know Nathan." Her expression shifted, a flicker of recognition, then a tight smile. "Rachel," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." I don't know why I did, but I walked into the room, the door clicking shut behind me. It was small, a single lamp casting soft light over a neatly made bed and a half-packed suitcase. My eyes caught on a stack of papers on the desk, a glint of something metallic beside them. Rachel leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "So, what's this about?" she asked, like she already knew. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the keycard. "I know you've been seeing Nathan," I said. "I have proof. Lucas saw you at the park. A caterer saw you here, and I heard him on the phone saying it's handled." Her smile faded, replaced by something harder. She walked to the desk, picking up her phone, and scrolled for a moment before turning it toward me. Text filled the screen, Nathan's name at the top. "I'm leaving her after the wedding," he'd written. "We'll start fresh, just you and me." My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the desk, the room tilting. "These could be fake," I said, but my voice was weak, desperate. Rachel laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Fake, sweetheart? He's been playing your sister for months. He needed her money, her connections. But he's done with her." I stared at the texts, each word a knife. One was time-stamped from this morning, hours before he said his vows. "I'll be with you tonight," he'd promised. My chest tightened, a sob caught in my throat. Clara's face flashed in my mind, her radiant smile as she walked down the aisle, trusting him completely. How could he do this? How could I let her marry him? Rachel watched me, her eyes cold, but not cruel, like she was used to cleaning up messes like this. "He's a liar," she said, "to me too. Promised me everything, then married her anyway. I thought you should know." I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was stand there, my hands shaking. The door creaked behind me, and I spun around, my heart stopping. Lucas stood in the doorway, his small frame outlined by the hallway light, his eyes wide with fear. "Mom!" he whispered, tears streaking his face. "I followed you. I'm sorry. My world shattered." He'd heard everything, seen the truth I was trying to shield him from. I rushed to him, dropping to my knees, pulling him into my arms. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, but nothing was okay. The truth was out, and it was tearing us all apart. I held Lucas tight, his tears soaking my dress, his small body shaking against me. Rachel's room felt like a trap, the air thick with her perfume and the weight of her words. I wanted to run to take Lucas and disappear, but my feet were rooted to the carpet. I stood lifting him into my arms, despite his size, and turned to Rachel. "Stay away from my family," I said, my voice low, barely holding together. She shrugged, unfazed, and I stumbled out the door, slamming behind us. The hallway blurred as I carried Lucas back toward the reception, his face buried in my shoulder. My mind was a storm, Nathan's texts replaying each one a betrayal, not just of Clara, but of every promise we'd believed in. I had to tell her now before another minute of this lie went on. The reception was in full swing, the band playing a slow ballad, Clara and Nathan swaying in the center of the dance floor, bathed in soft light. Guests smiled, snapping photos, oblivious to the bomb I was about to drop. I set Lucas down near our table, whispering for him to stay with our cousin, and pushed through the crowd, my heart in my throat. "Clara!" I said, my voice cutting through the music. She turned, her smile fading as she saw my face. Nathan's arm stayed around her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What's wrong now?" she asked, a hint of impatience in her tone. I pulled out Lucas's phone, my hands trembling, and opened Rachel's texts. "You need to see this," I said, holding it out. Nathan's face paled, but he recovered quickly, laughing. "Emily, it's a dance," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Let's not do this here." But I couldn't stop. "These are from Rachel," I said, my voice rising. "He's been lying to you, Clara. He's leaving you after the wedding." The music faltered, the band missing a beat, and heads turned. Clara snatched the phone, her eyes scanning the screen. Her breath hitched, her hand flying to her mouth. Nathan reached for her. "Baby, it's not what you think," he said, but she stepped back, shaking her head. The crowd parted, and there was Rachel standing at the edge of the dance floor, her red scarf a vivid slash against her dress. "He's lying!" "Clara," she called, her voice clear, cutting through the murmurs. "He's been with me the whole time." Gasps rippled through the guests, cameras lowering, faces frozen in shock. Clara's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, her white dress pooling around her. I dropped beside her, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away, her eyes wild with pain. "How could you do this, Emily?" she sobbed, her voice breaking. "You had to ruin everything." Ethan pushed through, his face red with anger. "What the hell, Emily?" he snapped. "You couldn't let her have one day Diane was there too?" Her hands clasped, eyes glistening with horror. "Stop this," she pleaded. "You're tearing us apart." I stood the room, spinning, every accusation a blade. Nathan was backing away, muttering excuses, but no one was listening. The guests' whispers grew louder, their stares heavy, judging me as much as him. I looked at Clara, crumpled and betrayed, at Lucas watching from the table, his eyes wide with fear, and felt my heart crack open. I'd wanted to save her, but all I'd done was break her world in front of everyone. The truth was out, raw and ugly, and I was drowning in it with no way to undo the damage. The reception was a frozen tableau. Clara's sobs echoing in the silence, the guests' stares pinning me in place. I wanted to disappear, to take back the moment I'd shattered her world, but there was no undoing it. Nathan had slipped into the crowd, his excuses trailing behind him like smoke. Ethan's glare burned. Diane's pleas rang in my ears, but Clara's words, "You ruined everything," cut the deepest. I looked at Lucas, his small face pale at the table, and something shifted inside me. I couldn't let this break us. I knelt beside Clara, ignoring the eyes on us, and touched her shoulder. "Come with me," I whispered. "Please." She flinched, her mascara-streaked face twisting, but I didn't let go. "We need to talk away from this." She didn't respond, but she let me help her up her body, trembling under the weight of her gown. I guided her through the parted crowd, my arm around her, and led her to the vineyard's garden, where the night air was sharp with the scent of roses. The fairy lights from the reception barely reached here, leaving us in a soft, shadowed quiet. We sank onto a stone bench, the cold seeping through my dress. Clara clutched her bouquet, its petals crushed, and stared at the ground. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice raw. "I didn't want it to happen like this, but you needed to know." She shook her head, her voice barely audible. "Why couldn't you wait? Why here?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, the guilt heavy, but not enough to silence me. "Because he was lying to you," I said. "He was going to hurt you worse if I didn't act." Clara's eyes met mine, red and swollen, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt beneath her anger. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her fingers twisting the bouquet's ribbon. I took her hand, steadying her. "I know you trusted him," I said. "But he was using you. Rachel showed me texts, Clara. He planned to leave you after tonight." Her breath hitched, and she pulled her hand away, but she didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, "He pushed for the wedding so fast, said it was romantic. I thought it was love." My heart ached for her, for the dream she'd built around a man who didn't deserve her. I remembered her excitement months ago, how she'd gushed about Nathan's grand gestures, how I'd bitten my tongue when things felt rushed. I should have spoken up then, but I wasn't going to stay silent now. "We can fix this," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You don't have to face this alone." Clara looked at me, her expression a mix of grief and something softer, like she was seeing me for the first time. Before she could respond, a small figure appeared at the garden's edge. Lucas clutching his stuffed dinosaur, his eyes wide but determined. "Aunt Clara," he said, shuffling closer. "I brought this for you." He held out the toy, its worn green fabric a stark contrast to her elegant dress. Clara's face crumpled, and she took it, pulling Lucas into a hug. "Thank you, buddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. I watched them, my chest tightening with a mix of pain and resolve. Lucas's courage, his need to protect her, reminded me why I'd pushed so hard. I couldn't let Nathan's lies define Clara's future or ours. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and looked at Clara. "We're going to get through this," I said, my voice firm. "But we need to start now. Let's go back to your room, figure out what's next." Clara nodded, still clutching the dinosaur, and stood, her movement slow but steady. As we walked back toward the lodge, Lucas between us, I felt a spark of strength ignite inside me. This wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I was ready to fight for her, for us, no matter what came next. We reached the lodge, the morning light filtering through tall windows, casting soft patterns on the polished floor. Clara's steps were slow, her hand clutching Lucas's dinosaur like a lifeline, while Lucas held my fingers tightly, his warmth grounding me. The reception was a memory now, its chaos locked away behind closed doors. But the weight of last night lingered in my chest. I led Clara and Lucas to the breakfast room where the family was gathered, their voices hushed, faces taut with unspoken questions. Ethan sat at the head of the table, nursing a coffee, his jaw set. Diane was beside him, twisting a napkin, her eyes avoiding mine. The air felt thick, like a storm was brewing, and I knew I had to take control before it broke us further. I cleared my throat, standing tall despite the ache in my bones. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the murmurs. "About Nathan. About what happened." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "You've done enough talking, Emily," he said, his tone sharp. "You turned Clara's wedding into a circus." I flinched, the sting of his words familiar, but I didn't back down. "This isn't about me," I said, looking at Clara, who sat beside me, her gaze fixed on the table. "It's about her. She deserves the truth, and we owe her our honesty." Diane shifted, her voice soft but firm. "Let's not rehash this," she said. "We need to move forward." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, Mom. Moving forward means facing what we ignored." I turned to Ethan, my voice unwavering. "You knew about Nathan's past, didn't you? You mentioned it once, then brushed it off. Why didn't you say more?" Ethan's face reddened, his coffee mug clinking against the table. "It was rumors," he muttered. "I didn't think it mattered. I thought he'd changed." I stared at him, my anger flaring, but tempered by something new, a clarity I hadn't felt before. "It did matter," I said. "And it's not just you." I looked at Diane, my heart pounding. "You pushed Clara toward him, Mom. You said he was good for her, stable." Why Diane's eyes glistened, her hands stilling. "I thought he'd give her what I couldn't," she said, her voice breaking. "A secure life." I was wrong. The room fell silent, her confession hanging heavy. I saw her then, not as the mother who always favored Clara, but as a woman carrying her own insecurities. Something softened in me, but I pressed on. We all made mistakes. I said, my voice gentler now. "Me too. I should have spoken up sooner, asked questions. But we're here now, and Clara needs us to be better." Clara's head lifted, her eyes meeting mine, a spark of strength flickering there. She nodded almost imperceptibly, and I felt a surge of hope. I turned back to the table, my gaze sweeping over Ethan, Diane, and the cousins who'd stayed quiet. "Nathan's gone," I said. "Sophie told me he left last night, didn't even take his things. But we're still here, and we're going to help Clara through this, starting with the truth." Ethan leaned back, his shoulders slumping. "All right," he said, his voice low. I should have said something. "I'm sorry, Clara." Diane reached for Clara's hand, her touch tentative. "I'm sorry too," she whispered. Clara's lips trembled, but she squeezed Diane's hand, a small gesture that spoke volumes. I sat beside her, my hand on Lucas's shoulder, and felt a shift inside me. For years, I'd swallowed my voice, afraid of rocking the boat, but last night had cracked something open. I wasn't just Clara's sister, or Lucas's mom, or the family's peacemaker. I was Emily, and I was done staying silent. As the family began to talk, voices overlapping with apologies and plans, I leaned down to Lucas, his eyes bright with trust. "You started this, buddy," I whispered, kissing his forehead. "You're my hero." He smiled, small but real, and I stood, my gaze settling on Clara. She met my eyes, and in that quiet moment, I saw her strength mirroring mine, a bond forged in truth. I nodded a silent promise to keep fighting and turned back to the table, ready to lead us forward. A week had passed since the wedding, and I was in Clara's San Francisco apartment, the late afternoon sun slanting through her bay window. The place was a mess of cardboard boxes and scattered clothes, Nathan's belongings piled in a corner like a bad memory. Clara stood at her kitchen counter, sorting papers, her movements slow but deliberate, a stark contrast to the trembling bride I'd held in the vineyard garden. Lucas was sprawled on the rug, sketching superheroes in his notebook, his quiet, humming a steady rhythm in the room. I sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Clara pack my hands, folding one of Nathan's old sweatshirts. We'd decided to start fresh to clear him out of her life, and today was about action, not just words. Clara paused, holding a stack of bank statements, her brow furrowing. "These aren't mine," she said, her voice low, almost to herself. I looked up, setting the sweatshirt aside. "What do you mean?" I asked, scooting closer. She spread the papers on the counter, her fingers tracing unfamiliar numbers. "They're Nathan's," she said. "He opened a joint account, but I never signed for it. Look at this. Withdrawals, thousands right before the wedding." My stomach tightened, a new kind of unease settling in. I leaned over, scanning the statements. Large sums moved to an account I didn't recognize, dated weeks ago when Clara was busy picking out centerpieces. "He was stealing from you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the realization hitting like a cold wave. Clara's jaw clenched, but she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded, her eyes hardening. "There's more," she said, pulling out a folder from the pile. I found this in his desk. It was a lease agreement for an apartment in Seattle, signed by Nathan, a loan dated for next month. My breath caught. He was planning his escape. I said, the pieces clicking together. Rachel, the text, the money, it was all part of his exit strategy. Clara's hands shook as she set the folder down, but her voice was steady. "I was so blind," she said. "I thought he loved me." I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You trusted him," I said. "That's not blindness. That's you being you." She met my eyes, a flicker of gratitude there, but the weight of betrayal still hung heavy. Lucas looked up from his drawing, sensing the shift. "Aunt Clara," he said, holding up a sketch of a superhero with a bright blue cape. "This one's for you. She's super strong." Clara smiled, small but real, and took the drawing, taping it to her fridge. "Thanks, buddy," she said, her voice softening. I watched her, seeing a strength I hadn't noticed before, like a seed breaking through soil. We kept working, sorting through Nathan's things, each discovery peeling back another layer of his deceit. A hidden credit card statement showed dinners and hotel stays Clara knew nothing about. A receipt for a plane ticket to Seattle, one way, tucked in a jacket pocket. Every find was a blow, but Clara faced them head-on, her silence more powerful than tears. I felt a quiet pride in her mixed with a gnawing guilt that I hadn't seen this sooner. As we packed, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark, my ex, asking to cut my custody time with Lucas next month. Normally, I'd have caved, avoiding the fight, but something in me snapped. I typed back, "No. We'll stick to the schedule." My fingers hovered over the send button, then pressed it, a small act of defiance that felt monumental. Clara noticed, raising an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded, slipping the phone into my pocket. "Just setting boundaries," I said, and she gave me a knowing look, like she understood more than I'd said. We worked until dusk, the apartment slowly transforming, Nathan's presence fading with each sealed box. But as the light dimmed, Clara found a small envelope tucked inside a book, her name scrawled on it in Nathan's handwriting. She froze, her fingers tracing the paper, and I saw the strength in her eyes waver. She didn't open it, just held it, her breath uneven. And in that moment, the room felt too small. The truth too heavy, like we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't yet face. Clara set the envelope down on the counter, her fingers lingering on its edge, as if touching it too long might burn her. The apartment was dim now, the sun gone, leaving only the glow of a single lamp. Lucas had dozed off on the rug, his pencil still in hand, his superhero sketches scattered around him. I watched Clara, waiting for her to speak, but she just stared at the envelope, her face unreadable. I wanted to urge her to open it, to rip through whatever Nathan had left behind, but something in her stillness stopped me. Instead, I stood quietly gathering the last of his shirts into a box, the fabric rough against my palms. 2 weeks later, we were at my house, a modest 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee. The dining table was crowded with family, a rare gathering since the wedding. Clara sat across from me, her hair pulled back, her face bare of makeup, but her eyes were sharper, like she'd shed a layer of herself. Diane was at the table's end, slicing homemade lasagna, her movements careful, almost apologetic. Ethan sat beside her, quieter than usual, his usual bravado gone. Sophie, the caterer, who'd become a friend, was there too, her presence a small comfort, like a bridge between that night and now. The clink of forks filled the silence, but the air was heavy, everyone tiptoeing around the truth we'd laid bare. I cleared my throat, setting down my glass of water. "We need to talk about what's next," I said, my voice low but firm. "Clara's healing, but we can't pretend nothing happened." Diane paused, her knife still in the lasagna, and looked at me, her eyes soft but guarded. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I pushed Clara toward Nathan, thinking he'd be her anchor. "I should have listened to you, Emily." Her words hung there raw and unexpected, and I felt a pang, not of anger, but of recognition. She was trying, maybe for the first time, to see me. Ethan shifted his fork, tapping the plate. "I screwed up too," he said, not meeting Clara's eyes. I heard things about Nathan, old stories, but I figured he was different now. "I'm sorry, Clara." Clara nodded, her lips tight, but she didn't speak. I watched her, wondering what that envelope held, the one she still hadn't opened, now tucked away in her purse. Sophie spoke up, her voice steady. "I had a boss once, lied to everyone, took what he wanted," she said. "Took me years to call him out." "You did it faster, Clara. You're stronger than you think." Clara's eyes flicked to Sophie, a faint smile tugging at her mouth, but it didn't reach her eyes. Lucas, sitting beside me, piped up, his voice bright in the heavy room. "I made a rule," he said, holding up a crumpled paper. "No secrets. Ever." He slid it across the table, and I saw Clara's hand tremble as she took it, her fingers tracing his childish handwriting. The table fell quiet, his words sinking in, a child's truth cutting deeper than any of us could. I looked around at Diane's bowed head, Ethan's clenched jaw, Clara's steady gaze, and felt the weight of what we'd built, fragile but real. But as we ate, I noticed Clara's silence, her fork pushing food around her plate, her eyes drifting to her purse. I knew she was thinking of that envelope of Nathan's final lie waiting to be read. Sophie caught my eye, her nod subtle, like she understood the unspoken. The meal ended, and as we cleared plates, Clara lingered at the table, her fingers brushing her purse. I stood beside her, not pushing, just there. She looked at me, her eyes tired but clear. "I'm not ready yet," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "But I will be." I nodded, my throat tight, and in that moment the room felt too still. Her words a quiet echo of everything we'd lost and everything we still had to face. The evening air was cool on my porch, the kind of quiet that settles in after a long day. Lucas was asleep upstairs, his room a soft glow from the nightlight he still insisted on. I sat in my old rocking chair, a spiral notebook open in my lap, the pages filled with my uneven handwriting. The crickets chirped in a steady rhythm, and the street was dark save for the faint flicker of a neighbor's porch light. I'd started journaling a few days ago, something I hadn't done since my divorce, when I needed to untangle the mess of my thoughts. Tonight, I wrote about the wedding, about Clara's crumpled face, about Lucas's brave little heart. But mostly, I wrote about the woman who'd spent years ducking conflict, swallowing her doubts to keep everyone else comfortable. That woman felt distant now, like a shadow I'd outgrown. My pen moved slowly, tracing the moment I stood up at that family dinner, demanding truth from Ethan and Diane. I'd been afraid, but I did it anyway, and that choice had changed something fundamental. I paused, my hand resting on the page, and looked out at the maple tree in my yard, its leaves rustling in the breeze. I used to think speaking up would break things, that my role was to hold the family together, no matter the cost. But silence hadn't saved Clara from Nathan's lies. It hadn't saved me from my own regrets. I wrote that down, the words heavy but freeing, like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. My phone buzzed on the armrest, Clara's name lighting up the screen. I answered, keeping my voice low. "Hey, you okay?" I asked. Her sigh came through, soft but steady. "Just wanted to tell you I'm starting therapy next week," she said. "Figure it's time to sort through this mess in my head." I smiled, a warmth spreading in my chest. "That's huge, Clara," I said. "I'm proud of you." She laughed, a small, tired sound. "You're rubbing off on me," she said. "I've been thinking about what you did, standing up to everyone. It made me want to be braver." Her words settled over me, quiet and profound, like a gift I hadn't expected. "I'm thinking about therapy too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's time for me to dig into why I stayed quiet so long." Clara was silent for a moment, then said, "You're not that person anymore. I see it." I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under me, and let her words sink in. She was right. I wasn't the same Emily who'd walked into that vineyard second-guessing every instinct. I'd fought for Clara, for Lucas, for truth, and that fight had reshaped me. I set the notebook down, my hands resting in my lap, and looked up at the stars peeking through the clouds. For the first time in years, I felt a stillness inside. Not the tense calm of holding my breath, but the kind that comes from knowing you're on solid ground. I picked up the phone again, Clara still on the line. "Let's make a deal," I said. "We both keep showing up for ourselves, for each other. No more hiding." She laughed again, stronger this time. "Deal," she said. I hung up the quiet, returning, and took a slow breath, the air cool and clean in my lungs. The night stretched out before me, vast and open, and I felt ready to meet it, not as the woman I'd been, but as the one I was becoming. The weekend sun was warm, painting the park in shades of gold. I spread a checkered blanket under an oak tree, its branches heavy with summer leaves. Clara sat beside me, her sundress bright against the grass, while Lucas ran ahead, chasing a butterfly with a net he'd made from a stick and an old sock. Diane was there too, unpacking a picnic basket, her hands steady as she arranged sandwiches and a thermos of lemonade. Sophie joined us, her laugh mingling with the breeze as she tossed a frisbee to Lucas. The park hummed with life, kids shouting, dogs barking. But our little patch felt like a world apart, a quiet we'd carved out together. Clara leaned back on her elbows, watching Lucas with a soft smile. "I'm thinking about a trip," she said, her voice casual but deliberate. "Just us sisters. Maybe somewhere with mountains where we can hike and breathe." I turned to her, surprised but warmed. "That sounds perfect," I said. "It's been too long since we've done something like that." She nodded, her eyes distant but clear. "I need to remember who I am," she said. "Not just Nathan's almost wife." I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You're already finding her," I said, and I meant it. Diane looked over, her expression softer than I'd seen in years. "I can watch Lucas while you're gone?" She offered, her voice tentative, like she was testing new ground. I'd love that. I met her gaze searching for the mother who'd so often chosen Clara's side, but found instead a woman trying to mend what she'd broken. I'd appreciate it, Mom, I said, and the words felt like a bridge small but sturdy. Lucas ran back, his net empty, but his face bright. Look, Mom, he said, pointing to a pile of sticks and leaves. It's a fort, our safe place. He tugged Clara's hand, pulling her to see, and she laughed, following him with a lightness I hadn't seen since before the wedding. I watched them, my heart full, and thought about the years I'd spent tiptoeing around my family's edges, afraid to take up space. That fear had kept me small, but facing Nathan's lies, standing up for Clara, had shown me I could be more. Sophie sat beside me, brushing grass from her jeans. My family had a rough patch too, she said, her voice low. Took a long time to rebuild. You're doing it right, Emily. I smiled, grateful for her quiet wisdom. It's messy, I said, but it's ours. She nodded, and we sat in companionable silence watching Lucas and Clara add twigs to their fort. Diane joined them, her laughter surprising me, a sound I hadn't heard in too long. As the afternoon faded, Clara returned to the blanket, her cheeks flushed from the sun. She pulled a small notebook from her bag, flipping to a page of scribbled plans. I've been writing ideas, she said, for the trip for work for me. I want to start over, but better. I looked at her, seeing the sister I'd always loved, but now admired in a new way. You will, I said, my voice steady. We both will. The park grew quieter, the sunlight softening, and I leaned back, letting the moment settle over me. Lucas's fort stood crooked but proud, a testament to his hope to our resilience. I closed my eyes, the breeze cool against my skin, and felt a peace I hadn't known I could claim. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough a stillness that held all we'd been through and all we'd become. Months later, I'm in Clara's new apartment, a cozy space in the heart of San Francisco, its walls alive with color. She's hung paintings she picked up at a flea market, bold strokes of blue and gold that catch the morning light. I'm on a step stool, helping her mount a canvas above her couch, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. Lucas is on the floor building a tower with wooden blocks, his laughter soft but steady, filling the room with a warmth I've come to cherish. Clara's different now, her movements sure, her smile less fragile. She's taken up pottery, her hands often dusted with clay, and her laughter comes easier, like she's rediscovered it. I hand her the hammer, our fingers brushing, and she grins. Thanks for this. She says, tapping a nail into the wall. Feels like I'm finally home. I nod, stepping down, my heart full. This place, this moment, it's hers, built from the ashes of what Nathan tried to take. I've changed too, though it's quieter, less visible. Mornings now start with a walk through my neighborhood, just me and the dawn, the streets silent except for the rustle of leaves underfoot. I used to rush through my days, always on edge, but those walks give me space to think, to feel the weight of who I am now. I've been seeing a therapist, a kind woman with a knack for asking questions that unravel me in the best way. She's helped me see how I carried silence like a shield, thinking it protected everyone but me. That's gone now, replaced by a voice I'm learning to trust. Clara finishes hanging the painting, stepping back to admire it. Looks good, she says, then turns to me, her eyes bright. I found something yesterday, she says, reaching into a drawer. She pulls out a small velvet pouch and shakes it into her palm. A bracelet, silver and simple, with one word engraved, trust. She slips it onto my wrist, the metal cool against my skin. For you, she says. For everything. My throat tightens and I touch the bracelet, the word a quiet echo of all we've been through. I don't know what to say, so I just hug her, feeling her strength mirror mine. Lucas looks up, his tower wobbling but standing tall. Can I have one too? He asks, and we laugh, the sound weaving us closer. Diane stops by later, her arms full of groceries for Clara's pantry. She's different too. Her usual briskness softened her words, careful but warm. She sets a bag of apples on the counter and catches my eye. You're good for each other, she says, almost to herself. I'm trying to be better too. I nod, seeing her effort the way she lingers now, listening instead of directing. It's not perfect, but it's enough a slow mending of old fractures. As Diane chats with Lucas about his blocks, Clara pulls me aside, her voice low. I read the letter, she says, her eyes steady. Nathan's letter, the one I found. It was an apology, but it wasn't real. Just more excuses. I burned it. I wait for her to say more, but she just smiles a small, fierce thing, and I know she's let it go. I think of my own past, the years I spent blaming myself for my divorce, for not being enough. That weight's lighter now, not gone, but manageable, like a scar that's faded with time. We sit for lunch, the four of us around Clara's small table, passing plates of sandwiches and fruit. The conversation is easy about Lucas's school, Clara's pottery class, Diane's new book club. I listen my bracelet catching the light and feel a quiet certainty settle in. We're not the same family, we were not the same people. We've been broken, but we're rebuilding piece by piece, and that's more than I ever thought possible. I take a sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through me, and let the moment hold me whole and still. After lunch, I slip out to Clara's balcony, a narrow strip overlooking the city's hum. The afternoon is crisp, the skyline a mix of sharp angles and soft clouds. I lean against the railing, the bracelet on my wrist glinting faintly, and let my thoughts drift. There's a stillness in me now, not the kind that comes from avoiding pain, but from walking through it and finding something solid on the other side. I think about the woman I was a year ago, always smoothing edges, keeping quiet to keep peace. That woman would have let Nathan's lies slide, would have buried her doubts to spare Clara's feelings. But Lucas's small, brave act, that blurry photo on his phone, woke something in me. It wasn't just about saving Clara. It was about trusting myself, about believing my instincts even when they led to hard places. I've learned that truth isn't always kind, but it's the only way to build something real. Clara's laugh drifts from inside, mingling with Lucas's chatter, and I smile, knowing she's found her own path to this truth. Diane's voice joins them softer now, asking Lucas about his favorite block tower design. We're all learning, stumbling, but moving forward, and that's enough. I think about the nights I spent blaming myself for not seeing Nathan's deceit sooner, for not protecting Clara from the start. But I've let that go. Guilt doesn't rebuild. It only traps you. Instead, I've chosen to listen to my gut, to my son, to the quiet voice that knows what's right, even when it's messy. That's the lesson I carry. Now, trust isn't just about others, it's about trusting yourself to face the fallout and keep standing. I've started small rituals to hold on to this. Every Sunday, I light a candle on my kitchen table, just one, and sit with my thoughts, letting them come and go without judgment. It's not grand, but it's mine, a way to honor the woman I'm becoming. Clara's doing the same in her own way, shaping clay into bowls that wobble but hold. Lucas, too, with his endless drawings, each one a story of hope. We're not perfect, but we're honest, and that's a foundation I never knew I could build. I look out at the city, the cars crawling below, the lives unfolding in every window, and feel a quiet connection to them all. We're all carrying something, aren't we? Wounds, hopes, truths we're afraid to face. But we keep going, and that's the beauty of it. I touch the bracelet, the word trust cool under my fingers, and know I'm ready for whatever comes next. Not because I'm fearless, but because I've learned to trust the strength I've found. Clara calls me back inside her voice light, and I step into the warmth of her apartment, the smell of coffee still lingering, Lucas's blocks now a sprawling city on the floor. I sit beside them, part of this small imperfect circle, and feel whole in a way I never expected. The past is behind us, not forgotten, but no longer in charge. We're here together, and that's more than enough. I'd love to hear from you now. When was a moment you trusted your instincts, even when it was hard, and it changed everything? Share it in the comments. Your story might touch someone else's heart. If this journey resonated with you, please give it a like, maybe subscribe to hear more, or share it with someone who needs a little light today. Thank you for being here, for listening, for carrying your own truths. Here's to healing, to trusting ourselves, and to the quiet strength we find along the way.